Welcome. If you're here, it's likely because you've got a desire to raise a seed round. And what we're gonna walk through today is the five-step process that I've used and many others have used to raise seed rounds quickly and effectively. And what I'd like to start with is just why am I qualified to be giving this information? I've got this belief that founders are the most advised people on the planet, or I certainly was as a founder. And I try not to give advice. I just try and share my experience about what works. I know there's probably a ton of people telling you what to do. So I'm just going to share a different perspective on how to get raises done. And this has worked for me. I've raised a few rounds personally, yeah, and on the venture side, like I've met with more than 1,000 VCs. I spend my day reviewing decks and working with venture partners. So I'm deeply embedded in the venture ecosystem, and I've got a sense of what folks on the venture side are thinking as well. But that all sounds really good in retrospect. But I'm kind of embarrassed by my first raise. Like I started raising for a company in 2008. I built a social media analytics platform. We had a few customers. I was really proud of my software, and I started to try and raise some money because I wanted to grow. Like we've got the first little bit of revenue, and it just was a mess. Like you know. I remember one VC I met, I got really excited about telling them about my story, went into the office and probably talked to them for most of the meeting about all my intricate plans so that they would know how smart I was and how much detail I had and how much I'd thought through everything. And they said, okay, well, thanks for telling me that. And I followed them up a few weeks later and we took another meeting. And after a couple of months, I get something like, oh, like you're not the right fit for us. And I'm like, why? We've spent weeks talking and I've got a great business. And I couldn't get any more information on that back then. So I spent way too long doing a lot of the wrong things. But on my third venture back business, I got to term sheet in 6 weeks and I got cash in bank within 9. So it's like, okay, something's changed here. And it was because of avoiding a bunch of mistakes and walking through a process, which I want to share with you today. So what I learned, it's not necessarily about who you know, it's about having really deep clarity, communicating that, and a process to support fundraising. Right? So by the end of this half-hour piece of content, we'll cover across and you'll have clarity on, exactly how to find VCs that are the ones that you should target, how to write emails that actually get open and get meetings with them, and what to say in those meetings, and how to create urgency so that investors move fast. So in terms of why most founders fail, from what I see on the other side of the venture table and also what I did myself personally, is that a few things happen. Number one, I've targeted investors that were completely wrong for me and they never would have funded my business. And I spent a ton of time pursuing lots of these people. And if I'd known this in advance, it would have saved me a heap of time and morale. You know, Also, the way I communicated with VCs isn't the way that they like to be communicated with. I'd email them my pitch deck and then they wouldn't reply. And I'm like, oh, well, they mustn't be interested. But, VCs don't like to communicate like that. Or, I'm trying to close them way too early. Like I'm pitching them with like, on a first meeting with a ton of company information without having deep clarity about what my business is doing and why it's a venture scale opportunity that deserves financing. Also, fundraising sequentially, not in parallel. So my experience has been is that if I meet one VC and then wait to get to a yes or a no, and then start with another one, well, my iteration cycles might be every 4, 6, 8 weeks. Well, so I need to actually make batches of them. Otherwise, I just run out of time and energy. So I see founders frequently doing these things, and I did all these things too. So no one had told me any differently. Now, I have some folks understand, like, I don't know if I'm a pre-seed or if I'm a seed or if I'm a Series A, but just broad strokes, pre-seed is sort of around about 500K. Seed seems to be about 2 to 3 million bucks in 2025, and Series A is north of 5 million. And there'll be different investors that care about these types of investments. And most funds will have a specific mandate saying, we're a pre-seed, we do pre-seed and seed, or hey, look, we're a growth fund, we do B plus, maybe we'll look at an A. So I wasted a ton of time just targeting the wrong VCs on that front. What I found is that I need to treat fundraising like a project. Like any other project I'm running in my business, I'm probably doing a customer discovery project and a, database upgrade project, or a recruitment project. And if you've had any amount of commercial experience, which most good founders have, how am I thinking about this as not just an ad hoc thing, but this is going to take time. It's going to distract me from my core business whilst I'm doing it. So how do I be efficient about it? And for me, that means getting prepared in advance, understanding that this project's going to take a little while. I'm going to get a lot of no's, like any sales project. Every no is one step closer to a yes, and I need to embrace the idea that rejection's normal. And so, how do I handle that in a way that's useful for me, whilst also parallel execution on key tasks, so that I'm not, I don't have blockers. That was news to me. Now, when a fundraise takes too long, or my experience was that, like, I'm burning through runway, I'm seeing my competitors raise funds and acquire customers that I would rather be having. It's hurting my morale, let alone my team's. And if this goes on for long enough and I'm unprofitable, like I have to shut down. All right. So, I mean, maybe I could bootstrap, but in my case, like, I knew I had more technology to build than I could bootstrap. So we needed to raise the money to support the market, especially to compete with competitors who are building a ton of great product that we didn't have money for. So I want to introduce to you the raise method, which is a way of thinking about how to raise funds. So first things first, we research and prepare. We don't go and talk to VCs immediately. We learn to articulate our story in a way that VCs will engage with. We start initiating contact. We secure meetings with first meeting, sequential meetings with other folks at the fund, and then we execute the close. So this provides quite a bit of clarity on what am I doing and when am I doing this. So we'll just talk through, a couple of folks who've used this process. Like, this isn't just a brand new idea. This is battle tested and others have used this. So, other people who, other than me, seem to think that this is quite useful. And we're going to hear from a founder who's used this process. So I'll just click play on that.
Hey, I'm Ryan, founder and CEO of Lineate. I worked with Nick through his fundraising course and we got so much value from it. The biggest win was how he helped us improve our messaging, which led to our first investor. So if you're a founder looking to raise, I can't recommend Nick and his fundraising course enough.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ryan. I always feel a bit embarrassed when people say nice things about this, but I'm just pleased that it works, to be honest. So thanks, Ryan. Yeah, so look, there's three things that I didn't know that I really wish I'd been told. And that in terms of between my first raise and third raise, like, these are really what became game changers for me. Number one is around the investor selection process. So, how do I find the 75 investors who I need to be talking to who could possibly fund me? And right now in 2025, there's more than 18,000 VCs globally. Like, that's also surprising for many founders. In Australia, there's 150 active financing organizations, but there's 18,000 globally. So how do you know, am I just spraying and praying with these folks? Or, when I think to raise, I'm like, all right, I'm going to go talk to Sequoia or Blackbird. I want their money, or just go, what, this is too hard, and kind of go into avoidance mode, which is what, I often do. So yeah, I've given up and then started again. So what I've found is that if we create what I call the three filter system, so how do I find VCs who fund at my stage, exactly at my stage, and do they invest in my category? So, if I'm a SaaS dev tools for health tech, do they invest in dev tools and health tech? Whatever your specific thing is, but find folks who actually fund that. And do they invest in my region? So if you're sitting in Australia, well, we know the Australian investors, but are there UK or North American investors who like funding Australian companies? North American investment in Australia was up 400% in the last 2 years. So, are those funds available to me? I just don't know. So who are they and how do I find them? So, this process takes me from 18,000 VCs into my 75 perfect fit investors. So I'm going to show you how this works. And this used to be a manual process, but AI has come about, so we've been automating it, and I've been trying to make this super efficient for folks. So I just want to show you a hypothetical startup called Housekeeper, which is like, you can manage WordPress with AI. intersection of two things sounds pretty cool. This is what we do. We simplify and manage WordPress with AI. Whether it's fundable or not, we'll find out. So, I've got my startup. What we're able to do is I've got a little summary pitch here, and you don't need to read all this, but here's just a brief summary of what the business does. So what I'm able to do is we've developed out a ChatGPT agent where I can take my business and load it in here and say, here's Housekeeper. It's an AI agent that makes WordPress beautiful. The problem is WordPress powers 43% of the web, but owners can't safely edit their own pages. It's a big opportunity by market. And here's why now it's a good thing. And we're raising 2 million seed. We're Sydney based, but we're going to incorporate in Delaware. So I'm just going to run that through this GPT. This GPT is loaded up with those 18,000 VCs and all who they are, their partners, their deals. And the GPT is now starting to come back, you know, giving me some information about, who I'm reaching out to. Why is it doing this? All right. Please give me my investor list. Great. So this takes just a few seconds. It's saying, all right, you're Housekeeper AI, you're in AI SaaS dev tools and website ops. Oh, I didn't know I was in website ops. That's good news. There's a category for me that I wasn't aware of. There's 82 VCs that match on this. I'm going to show you the first 25, so that just to make sure they're okay. So FJ Labs, okay, I've never heard of them. They're in New York, but they like doing global checks. They write 400K to 7 million. They like SaaS and automation tools. And who do I speak to there? Fabrice Grinder. Okay, that's good. There's Fabrice. SV Angel. Okay, I've heard of them. They seem like a good fund. Greylock. Oh, that sounds big. Okay, it's a long shot, but here's David C is an advisor there. And if I spoke to him about autonomous agent for legacy systems, that'd be up his alley. So, this goes on and on, but I get a sense of like, who are the funds? Why would they invest? Where are they? Who do I speak to there? And the GPT does all the core research for me, which is super useful, saves me a ton of time. I have seen lots of lists in the past, but this is what we've found is that like in 2025 is the easiest way to get to your 75 investors. So once I've got that list of all the investors who are matched for me and why they'd fund, I've got those 75 VCs. They're in my industry, they're in my geography, and I've got the right person and contact details. Like that's part of this research process. Like I want to know this before I start raising. So very cool. Oh great, I'm all excited. I've got all these VCs that I want to talk to. But what am I supposed to say to them? Like what precisely floats their boat? And what I've found is, especially sitting on the other side of the VC table, is that what actually gets VC's attention is kind of different than what I thought. So, as someone myself who sits on a VC team, I might get 100 or 200 decks in my inbox a month. On a busy day, it might be 30. Now, if I've got back-to-back meetings all day and I'm meeting 10 other founders that day, I don't necessarily have the headspace to open up a deck from someone I don't know, to download it, to wait for PowerPoint to load. I just don't open them. Like it's sad for founders, but I didn't know that. I thought these guys' job was to look at all my PDFs and they'd be super excited by all the effort that I'd put in. But VCs like protect their time pretty ruthlessly, and with this much noise, and they also get sent a ton of decks from founders who don't understand that it's the wrong stage or the wrong category. So VCs don't open your decks for human reasons, not out of rejection. So what gets VCs to stop scrolling through their inbox and start reading is when there's a short, concise bit of information that enables the VC to emotionally connect with what the problem that you're solving is, right? So, if it's something that in their mandate that they care about and I can articulate quickly, like, this pain point that you experience, they're like, oh yeah, I feel that. They may not know that they feel that, but that's what kind of grabs people's attention. And then I need to communicate, or what gets VCs to read is when there's deep clarity into precisely what the solution is, precisely what the market opportunity is, what the problem is, why it matters, and the impact of fixing this. So I can, in 10 or 15 seconds, scan it and go, yep, oh, painful problem. This matters a lot. Oh, and it's huge. And thirdly is leaving information out. I think as a founder, there's kind of a bias to over communicate. Like I want to tell them all my plans, but like think about, a first date, for example, is if you went on a first date with someone, they told you their whole life story and, all their plans for the future, like it'd be overwhelming. So, you want to create a desire to know more. And there's, if we can manufacture intrigue, or genuinely have it even better, then it creates much greater desire for investors to reach out. So, what I like to write, and part of the process that we go through in the raise process, is to actually take all of your information and distill that down into a very concise piece of communication, which states the problem, the solution, some proof that this matters, or proof that customers are buying this, and some intrigue. I've got an example which we looked at for Housekeeper right here, which is where I took in a pitch deck and I've said, what's the insight behind what we're doing? Lovable solved website creation, but nobody solved the work of running, fixing, and improving existing sites. Like if you connect with that, if you're in AI ops, if you're in website ops as an investor, you'd be like, hey, that's true. No one thought about that. Or I hadn't thought about that. That's interesting. What's our solution? Very sharp, an AI agent that does X, Y, Z. No big long technical specifications, just concise information. Why now? Okay, great. So what that creates, engagement as well. So, in communicating with VCs, I need to be very short, sharp, and concise around problem solution, some proof that this matters, and intrigue. So, here's an example of an email, and this is just to a hypothetical VC, Jim at Sequoia, and this is a cold email. I'd send something like this, a title called "A Thesis You Might Enjoy Tearing Apart." Like how he may take the bait on this, right? Jim, I imagine you'd have a sharp take on how the legacy web could feel as effortless as lovable. Can we get 15 minutes in the calendar? Here's the information, right? So he can read this in 15 seconds on his phone and go, sure. Eric has CC'd to find a time, or here's my calendar. Or say, hey, this isn't for me. But it's easy for him to communicate with, and he can quickly understand the business. If that had a long email with a ton of pitch deck and plans attached, he's not going to read it. So this is how VCs like to be communicated with, and also I see VCs communicate with each other using this. So if I've messaged the wrong guy on the team, he can copy paste my little investor teaser at the bottom and just stick it in WhatsApp or on Slack, or it makes it very easy for VCs to share my information. So that's what a sharp intro looks like. Now, if you're like me in my early stages, I don't know any VCs, or I certainly don't know the ones that I want to talk to. And if attention is a scarce resource, not just for the VCs, but I would like to get introductions between people. And often enough, founders come to me and say something like, hey, Nick, can you introduce me to some investors? And I don't have the headspace or time to run this process that I've just gone through with you around finding the right VCs, getting the clarity of messaging and why it matters to them. So the process that works for me as a founder when I'm fundraising is to do all this work in advance for the people involved and use mutual connections and other founders who've been funded by a VC to share the information across. Now, two things. One is VCs love getting introductions to other founders from their portfolio. And VCs also ask their portfolio, hey, listen, if you see any other startup folks that you like or other founders that you come across, please introduce me. So both of those parties have a desire to be communicated with each other with your information if presented correctly. So the process that I use is, let's say, for example, we ran that process before. I found a VC that General Catalyst was on that list, and I'm like, I'd really like to talk to someone at General Catalyst. I don't know anyone at General Catalyst, so I would go to LinkedIn and start searching around for VCs who work there. I'd check out General Catalyst as a fund. I'd go and look at who works there, find someone when I'm engaging with funds, I don't try and talk to the managing partner. Like there are people who work in mid ranks at most VC fund who their job is to meet and screen early stage companies. So, I'm going through the list and I don't want to meet a partner. I don't want to meet the co-founder. I don't want to meet a big dog. I want to meet someone who's just an investor or an analyst or something like this. So, Alex was an investor and I want to reach out to her. Now, I don't know her, but I've got some friends who do. So I'm going to go and look at who do I know that knows her. Some of these people, if you're anything like me, I don't actually know very well. So I'll scan through the list and go, who have I actually worked with on this list that, Mike Overall. Okay, yeah, I know Mike. We shared a co-working pod together like 3 years ago. All right. I mean, we're not best friends, but I know him. So, cool. Mike's a guy who could connect us, and that would be a good intro. So what I want to do is make it really easy for Mike he's busy. He's got 14 things going on this morning as well. How do I make sure that it's really easy for him to connect me? So I'll write an email that looks almost copy paste like this. I'd send an email to Mike saying intro to Alex at General Catalyst. Hi, Mike, can you connect me with Alex at General Catalyst? This will be up her alley. I've drafted you an email below. All right. Now, all Mike has to do is click forward, delete the top off the email, click send, and my information concisely communicated about why this matters in a consumable format for Alex at General Catalyst has been sent to her by someone she knows. So she'll open that inbox. She wrote a check to this guy, or they've done work together. And so what I've found is that this dramatically increases the response rate. I might get a 5 or 10% response rate to cold emails. I'll get more like a 40 to 60% response rate. Or, Mike, she may not reach out to me, but she may go back to Michael and say, hey, this isn't a fit, or actually should speak with this person. So Mike may forward me some feedback and communication about how this fits for General Catalyst. So either way, I learn something and I actually get responses from VCs. So now that we know, like we've got this list of who to talk to and what to say to them, how do I close fast? Well, the secret that I learned is I need to drive competitive tension to get deals done. And I didn't know how to do that in the beginning in a way that was graceful and not like a jerk off. So why fundraising for me took so long is that I meet one investor, a couple of weeks later, get another meeting, maybe a third meeting, wait, get rejected. So you can see how if I'm meeting investors one after another, it can take a really long time. So what I do is, as per Ray's method, is get incredibly ready beforehand with all the stuff that I need. I've got all my company information articulated, all the stuff that I'm ready to go. Then I start raising. And I raise using a parallel pipeline strategy. And my goal is to meet 10 to 15 investors in the same period of time. Ideally 2 weeks, maybe it's 3 or 4. But the goal of this is, it creates competitive tension, but it gives me a sense of confidence. Like if I'm just meeting one VC and I get a no, like it's a bad month. If I'm meeting 10, like I don't mind a no because I know I've got another 2 that afternoon. And it also gives me a sense of leverage as I'm going through this. It also increases decision-making timelines at VCs because they will ask, oh, who else are you talking to about this? And if I say just you, it doesn't create pressure on them to get going. So how I do this, and as per Ray's method, is I tier my investors and I go and meet the 25 lowest desire investors. These are the ones that I'm happy to burn. I don't necessarily want their money. I mean, I'll take it because I don't want to die as a business and I want cash. But I understand that my first batch of meetings are going to be practice meetings. I want to use these to extract information, to learn about their objections, and to hone my pitch and my business. Then at some point, once I'm comfortable with that, I'll go and meet the next batch, which these are the good fit investors, which I would take their money. I'd be very happy to have them on board, right? And the goal here is to get some interest from them. And at a place where I'm getting interest from the mid-tier investors, then I go and speak to my dream investors. And I'll be able to, I've seen Blackbird take a year to do a seed deal. I've also seen them get a term sheet out the door in 3 days. And the difference between those things is the guy who got the term sheet in 3 days, he had interest from other investors, and Blackbird had a sense that they were going to miss out. So hooray, I've got my tiering, I'm going to execute down this path, but I actually get a meeting. What am I actually supposed to do in my first meeting? Well, the worst sitting on the VC side of the table, the worst outcome I can get as a VC is if I take a call with a founder and they give me a demo for 30 minutes out of 30 minutes. Like, I do not want to see your product on meeting one. This is a first date. Leave a little something for later. So what a really good meeting for me when I run these and when a founder does it on the other side is in the first 5 minutes, I might recap very briefly. Hey, listen, we're Housekeeper AI. WordPress powers 43% of the internet, but it really sucks to update. There's $15 billion a year spent on this. And, we've been testing this, and this is working. This isn't like, I need to be honest, authentic, like don't pretend to be something I'm not. I don't have VCs at the seed and pre-seed stage don't expect you to have everything and kind of actually value you being like, hey, we don't know this and we're thinking about this and we don't have all the answers right now. This is what's working. This is what our hypothesis is. But most importantly, I want to use the bulk of time in this meeting to do Q&A of the investor. Not let them ask me questions. I want to go in there actively prepared to extract information and intelligence that's useful for me. Well, why is this makes me look good to an investor? Like they will respect me more if I've come in and I'm trying to like get information from them rather than trying to, get validation seeking. And we'll in a second we'll look at what to actually ask them. But in the last 5 minutes, what I want to ask them, the takeaway of any VC meeting or the goal of any VC meeting is to get another meeting. It's not to get a check. All right. So in the last 5 minutes, I'll be like, hey, who else at your fund would have a take on my sector that I could meet with? Or hey, are there any other VCs that you think that I haven't considered that I should be talking with? And they may be like, oh, Tom over at Excel loves deals like this at this stage. Great. Now, if I can get an intro from that VC to another VC, like I've now got the best meeting of my week because one VC introduced me to another VC. So using or maybe they're going to introduce me to a founder in their portfolio. That's really great too. So it doesn't really matter, but I want to walk away with one introduction at minimum. That's my goal of a meeting with a VC. Right? So what do I say in the meeting? Right? Well, what I really like to do, I go that problem solution market. Here's where we're up to. I then just don't let them ask me questions and jump straight in and say, hey, listen, have you seen anything similar in our space? How does this compare? Right? And I shut up and I listen. And they may say stuff I disagree with. They may name competitors who I think have got a worse product. I don't need to argue with them. I just collect that information. And I'll say, okay, well, what parts of this feel exciting to you? Get them to analyze your business and tell you back what bits they like. That's really useful to know because whatever they've said to me, I'm going to say to the next VC. Like I'm arming myself with intelligence on what to communicate with folks. I then like to understand from them, like these are VCs see, they have a very wide view of the entire market. I'm just thinking about my market, my sector, what's worked in my past. I'd say, hey, listen, if you're working on this, what would you focus on? And they might say, oh, I'd double down on this go-to-market path, or hey, I wouldn't do that, I'd do this. And why that's really useful is if over several VC meetings I'm hearing the same thing, I may change my strategy. Right? So I'm getting really critical and useful feedback from them. My favorite question of all is, hey, mate, like this is a bit cheeky, but if you're our chief strategy officer for a day or a month, what would your priorities be? And this is forcing them to just think through my business, right? So by contrast, if someone pitches me for 45 minutes, I'm tuned out. I'm thinking about my lunch break. I'm thinking about how my kids have kept me up last night. I'm thinking about how, this relationship isn't going as well as I hope. Like, I'm in my own head, right? Asking people questions forces them to think through my business and actually connects them with what I'm doing, right? And then I'll finish up with, hey, listen, what would you want to see in our next meeting? Assuming that there will be a next meeting. And they'd say, oh, look, well, I'd love to see your product. Or what I'd really like to see is your traction data. Or, hey, like this is the kind of thing. So I know what to prepare so that it's ready to go. Because they may ask for things that I don't have. And if all VCs are asking for something that I don't have in my first 25 meetings, probably go and get that thing before I'm going to go up for the big dogs. I've got full meeting guides for first through fifth meeting on the Raise Academy site. Now, I didn't know what VCs actually meant because I kept hearing things like, hey, this isn't a fit for us, or hey, I'll keep us updated, or come back with more traction. Like, VCs don't say, yes, we will fund you in a first or second meeting. They will say something like, hey, this is right up our alley. Or how quickly are you planning on closing? Like I had no idea that that was a positive signal, you know. Or if they say, if I'm raising 2 mil and they say, what would you do with five? Like, okay, that's a really positive signal out of a VC. If they say, send me the data room, or hey, can I talk to my partners about this? Like that means they're interested. That's a like we're progressing this conversation. So listen out for those things. But here's what no sounds like, which is quite confusing to me, is really interesting. It's a bit early for us. My first time, I'm like, cool. That means they're going to fund me in 3 months. That means like, unless something dramatically changes in the business, we're not funding you, right? Same as come back when you've got more traction. And the reason VCs don't give outright no's is because they've got no incentive to. Like if they say no to you, founders take this personally. Fuck those guys. I don't want anything to do with them, And then you pivot a month later and then you hit the next lovable and you're not calling them, right? So they have a reason to say, hey, keep me posted. When they say come back with more traction, what they're saying is come back when you're growing 10 times more quickly. Like that's what that kind of really means, but they don't want you to not tell them that. So once I'm in a place where I'm talking with a bunch of different VCs and I've iterated through the process, especially in this mid zone, when I'm starting to see some soft interest, like, hey, how much you starting to raise? I'll come back and meet my partner. I then use that information in my next meetings with VCs. In my early pitch in the beginning, I'd say, hi, look, we're solving this problem. We've got this solution. We're going to market here. We're in active conversations with these two funds. We're planning to close in the next 8 weeks. We'd be keen to include you if you're interested. Now I'm into the questions, right? Real casual, like just some additional information. I'm not giving them a hard ask. I'm just including this information in the first 5 minutes. Hey, what would you do if me or my strategy officer? What about this stands out to you? Who can you intro me to? Like, if there's a level of interest, you'll know. Like catching a fish, you feel it. Yeah. And these three things that I've learned, like, I mean, there's so much to know about capital raising and so many mistakes to make. But like today, we've covered across how do you select your investors, what actually gets their attention, and how do I conduct myself and create competitive tension in amongst this group. But there's a ton more to learn. So that's why I wanted to tell you guys about Raise Academy. What it is, it's a complete 5-step process for raising your round with all the information, templates, and processes to get this done in 90 days. Like what's inside this is the 5 core training modules where we unpack in detail all these steps. The 18,000 global GPT. We run weekly live workshops, co-working sessions. There's a private founder community and all the templates and systems you need to get your round done. So what that looks like is how do I research and prepare? How do I articulate my story precisely? How do I initiate those intros? And for many founders, that involves co-working and accountability because I might know what to do, but it might be, I might fear rejection or have some perfectionism going on, which makes it hard to actually do the work. I secure those meetings, drive competitive tension, and then how do I actually execute the close? How do I negotiate a term sheet? How do I get a due diligence room in place that will pass DD? How do I get through legals? All those things. So we cover all those things through Raise Academy. You've seen the 18,000 VC GPT. It's got a ton of great information in there, like what are relevant companies, what other deals have these people done, who are the partners, what are their contacts, and I wish I had this in the past. I'm so pleased that we got to build it. Even 6 months or a year ago, I was wrangling spreadsheets to find this information. So you can still do that, but this saves a ton of time. We run weekly live workshops. So that first 5 minutes of what I say in a VC really matters. So I want to practice that a few times. So we run groups of founders pitching each other and saying, hey, listen, I might do my pitch and then get feedback saying, hey, you're giving me unnecessary technical information here, or hey, I didn't understand that. Because as a founder, I find it hard to see the wood from the trees sometimes. And we run office hours every week on Fridays, so you can bring your questions. Hey, listen, this isn't working for me. I don't know what to do here. Like I can get some feedback on this. There's a private founder community, which is super useful, especially for accountability partners, and templates and systems for everything. So that may be how do I set up a VC CRM? Because if you're anything like me, I can't manage 75 outreach processes in my email. I'm a bit ADHD. I'm gonna forget stuff. I got too many distractions. So how do I set up a VC CRM? Where's all the playbooks for what to write and send? So we've got all that information. And what I've been able to do is to make a guarantee on this is that for folks who do this Raise Academy course, if you go through this, we guarantee that you'll do 10 quality VC meetings in 90 days, or like there's no money involved here. So it's really risk-free. What we're asking for is 1,497 USD, and that's less than 1 week of runway for most startups. So if it saves you 3 months off your raise, I don't know what you're burning a month or what your opportunity cost is in time. This saves a ton of money and effort, and let alone the stress. So this isn't for everyone. This is for just pre-seed to seed stage founders raising 500K to 5 mil, and they want to raise now. You know, like if you want to raise in 6 months, that's totally fine. There may be another time to start this, and there's some work involved. Like I don't raise for you; you have to do the work. All right. So if you guys have got interest in this, you can just fill out the application. I'll see whether you're a fit. And hey, listen, do I think you can raise? And if so, we'll go through this process. So look, I'll stick that in the chat. You can use it. I don't mind if you do that or not. I'm just letting you know that this is available. There are a few spots for January, which is cool. That'll be in the chat. And yeah, there is all the information about Raise Academy and getting going on your first raise. So yeah, I'll open up the floor to Q&A. If you guys have got any questions, happy to take them about you, your business, your fundraise, or just where you're struggling in your process. So yeah, floor's open, folks.